It's now time for our next SeeIt video. This time we'll be talking about variables. To understand variables, I want you to picture a post office. Have you ever been in one? When you go into the post office, there is a large bank of post office boxes. This picture kind of shows you what I'm talking about. A couple of things to note that you should know about these post office boxes. First of all, they come in lots of shapes and sizes, and each one has a unique number or name on the front of it. So this is kind of the same thing as variables. As we're writing our programs, sometimes we need a place to store some information so we can use it later. This temporary storage is variables. Just like these post office boxes, variables have different sizes and shapes. They have a name, just like the name on the front of a post office box. They have a type that represents the size of what we can put inside the post office box, and they have a value. The value is what letters or packages or whatever it might be are in the post office box. When it comes to Scratch, we don't have to think a lot about the type or the size of the variable because Scratch kind of takes care of that for us in most cases. That makes it a little bit easier for us. So why is it that we need to use variables? I already said that we kind of sometimes need a storage place, but let's look at a situation where we would use a variable. So let's say that I have a user that's going to be using the program that I'm creating. And what I want to be able to do at the end is display some information. So the user would give me input. We've already talked about input earlier. And then I'm going to do something with the input, and I'm going to then output it to the display. But in the middle, there's going to be some calculations that are going to happen. So here's where we really need a variable. So we can't just go from user input to display in this particular case. We have to take a different path. And so these little shopping carts are going to represent places that we store data or variables. These shopping carts are kind of like the post office boxes I was talking about earlier. So what's going to happen is the user is going to input some data or whatever it is they input, and we're going to store that variable to use later. Then we're going to get the variable and we're going to perform some calculations on it that we know that we need to be able to do. And then when we're done calculating, we're going to put it in a variable again. And then when we're ready to output it, we're then going to take it out of that variable and we're going to put it on the screen. So this is a really common pattern that we see in coding that you're going to have an opportunity or a chance to do a little bit of practice with here in a little bit. But before we do that, let's go back to Scratch and let's look at how we might do this in Scratch. We're back in Scratch to learn a little more about variables. As you can see, this is basically where we left off when we were talking about sequencing. I'm going to name a new program here, my variable program. Hit enter. We've got our bear here again. We're going to use the bear, and I'm going to go through an example that is kind of like the one that we were just talking about with the user input and the display. So let's go back to just using our standard when green flag clicked. So the first thing to think about here is, if I can find it, not sure why I can't, there we go, is we're going to ask the person who's the user to type something for some input. And we're just going to use text in this case. So what if we say here, so this is under sensing, ask what's your name and wait. But we can change this message and I'm going to say, give me a number. Okay, and then they'll wait. All right, so automatically in Scratch, when I use this ask block, when the user types in whatever it is, a number or whatever we ask them for, it's going to automatically store what they type in a variable called answer. And you see this answer right here. In fact, if you check this little box, answer will show up over here so we can see what the user types. And that's great. So we will be using that. But in addition, I want to create a variable. So we come over here to data, and we're going to click on data, and we're going to make a variable. And in this case, we're going to call it my number. And then usually we check this radio box for this sprite only. Click OK. Now notice we got my number in here too. One of the things that my number has, with each variable, there are 4 blocks that come with it. And we'll be using at least one of these. So we're going to ask the user for a number. Now we need to calculate, and answer is already stored. So that's our first shopping cart. And then we're going to calculate a new number, do some calculations, and come up with another variable. And that one is going to be my number. So let's first do this. Here's where we're going to do our calculation. Now, under operations here, we can pick from some things that we use to calculate. So let's just do something really simple. Notice I'm going to drag this over and plunk it right on where that 0 is. Plunk. All right, so we're going to take answer. There's our variable. I'm going to drag it over here and put it in the first of these 2 little white circles. The next circle, I'm just going to click on it and put a number in here of 100. So basically what we're doing is we're asking the user to give us a number. Then as part of our calculation, we're taking that number, which is answer, and we're adding 100 to it. And then we're putting it in a new shopping cart with a variable called my number. Okay? And then the last thing we're going to do is we are going to display that number. And actually, the bear over here is going to say that number. So we drag our say block from looks, and then I'm going to come back over to data and see my number right here. I'm going to drag it, and I'm going to put it right there where it says hello. And now we've got a simple little program that is going to do all the little steps that we talked about. Okay? So let's see how it works. I'm going to click the green arrow. Give me a number. Okay. Let's make the number 50. And then I'm going to hit the little checkbox here. Now look, it magically showed us 150. See how I did that? So look at these variable numbers. First one is 50, and the second one, my number, is 150 because we added 100 to the number. So there's lots of things you can do with variables. Take a little bit of time to play around with this and add other pieces to it. And then, of course, read the lesson under Learn It, and then try out some of the exercises to continue to learn.